There we are, Anthony. We're live. Did you get the green screen positioned as needed there? We were doing some last minute set changes this morning. How's everyone doing? Happy Saturday, you guys. Hopefully you're having a great weekend so far. We wanted to jump on here and get a live podcast in. We've been quite busy over the last couple of weeks. As many of you are aware, we did our big Texas facility tour, came back last week. We had a couple traditional videos. And then next week, Anthony, we've actually started to line up quite a few CEO interviews. So we can touch on that. But before we do, wanted to check in on you. How are you doing? How's the weekend so far?
Yeah, we're more than halfway through the day now on Saturday. So yeah, been nice day weather. Bit of golf this morning.
Oh, did you? I was watching the NHL playoffs last night. Shout out to the Edmonton Oilers, who are, I think, the second team ever in the league, Anthony, to come back from a 3-0 start to a 7-game series. So we'll see on Monday if they can seal it up or if Florida will win.
You might as well be talking Chinese to me. I have no idea.
Oh, there you go. Teaching you some North American heritage over here in the NHL. Let us know whether you're cheering for the Oilers or the Panthers, you guys, in the comment section below. Now, to get onto topic here, big week in the markets, you guys. Bitcoin price relatively stable here. So I'll bring up a couple charts, Anthony. We can talk through a few of these tables. Then we'll get into some of the live viewer questions here. So overall, you guys, Bitcoin price really hasn't done a lot in the last couple of months. This is a 6-month view here. You can see we crossed the $60,000 milestone there in March. We've had a couple entrances into the $70,000 club, and we seem to be really settling out or trading pretty sideways, consolidating in this $65,000, $64,000 range. So we'll talk about the miners' performance next, Anthony. But in terms of Bitcoin itself and the spot price, how are you feeling right now? Any surprises, or were you expecting this kind of consolidation post-halving?
I think looking at previous cycles, this is what was probably expected. We know the halving in April, literally 2 months ago. So we've talked about, Bitcoin price post-halving, and generally, 3, 4, 5 months after the halving, we'll see some upturn there. So we'll be watching carefully. We know in recent periods that there's been some, selling of Bitcoin. So we talked about those people that held Bitcoin for longer than 12 months or 2 years without moving it. And the statistics of those people now has been a little bit of a shift. So there's been a little bit of selling, some profit taking, and that happened at the previous cycle as well. So not totally unexpected. We're still seeing miners sell, even though the Bitcoin price is, it's still close to 60% of where it was at the beginning of January. So we've got probably more than half the miners selling. We've got a few that are literally, hodling everything now. So the likes of Riot, the likes of CleanSpark, the likes of Hive have been really growing their hodl over the past sort of 6 months. And their process is really, they believe the price is going to go higher, and it's in their interest to hodl as much as possible. We've seen Marathon also not eat into their hodl of over, getting close to 18,000. They've been adding a little bit every month, selling quite a bit, to keep their production and their operational costs paid for. And then some of the other miners there, Bit Digital have been growing their hodl as well. They've got a very sizable Ethereum balance. In fact, if you look at what they've got there in terms of hodl, and I think DR picked up on this in our chat the other day. Mm-hmm. We're looking at about 130, 140 million just in crypto hodl, and with another 40 plus million in cash. So, they're sitting at the moment with a market cap not much more than 300 million, but about 170, 180 million in the treasury. So they're sitting really comfortable. But yeah, this price seems all right. If you go back there, look at March there, when it hit 60,000, we're in, getting towards July now, it's still in the 60,000 range. So it seems to have found that range there, and we're now look for maybe an uptick, because the ETFs haven't gone away. There's, they're still banging the ETFs there. There's still a positive adoption out there that people want to own Bitcoin, and there's more and more companies getting on board. So I'm not disappointed. I've been quite surprised with the mining companies, their reaction to the change in Bitcoin price, because that's been a bit different. You can probably go.
Yeah, let's get into that one. I was surprised is a nice word to say, Anthony. And looks like we actually have a ton of Oilers in the audience today, Anthony. We've had about 15 comments. So we'll get into the comments. I see you guys talking about altcoins as well. So we'll get into that in a second here. What I've been noticing though, Anthony, and I saw a few comments on X about this, is as we get this sideways consolidation, it really helps take some of the buying pressure, not only off Bitcoin itself, but off the miners. So one of the technical indicators I use quite a bit, you guys, is RSI, so Relative Strength Index. And it basically measures 20 and 80 are kind of the two focal points of the chart that you want to look at. It measures whether stocks or equities or commodities are either undersold or overbought. And in a lot of situations, when you see a big run up like this around December for the miners, it was a great example. We saw the RSI topping out at 85, 90, 95 for some of these stocks, indicating that they were very heavily bought or overbought at that time. And a lot of people have said, hey, I'd rather see Bitcoin at $65,000 in the underbought situation than overbought. So we are starting to see that dynamic kind of work itself through, which is generally bullish for these type of equities. But on the flip side, Anthony, and you're exactly right, if you take a look at Friday's close here, you guys, absolute bloodbath across the board for the miners. My personal thesis here is we saw a lot of interest in the HPC trade. That maybe is waning off a little bit now. It's been a couple of weeks since the CoreWeave news came out. Obviously, the Bitcoin price, the hash price has retreated a little bit, but a lot of these companies, Anthony, double-digit negative moves on Friday. Argo Blockchain leading the pack, or I guess bottom of the pack at just about 16% down. Cypher 13, and then some of the more normal companies we cover on the channel: Soluna, Wolf, CleanSpark, heavy hitters in the space, but still taking a big hit in terms of share price on Friday's close. So, what were your thoughts here, Anthony?
Yeah, I did see some SEC documentation about Cypher. It looks like Bitfury, who are the biggest shareholder, sold massive chunks of shares in the last few days. So whether that's had any impact, if you look at the volume there for Cypher, 20 million, average volume 8 million. So that indicates that something's been happening there. So there's more to. You've got to keep doing your research on some of these companies. Make sure you find out who internally, if there's any big sales there, you can find that from very quickly going through the SEC documents, which are listed on every miner's website. They'll have an SEC on the financials, so have a look at that and you get your updates from there. But yeah, I noticed from Cypher there was 3 big sales. I think each of them was well over 300,000 shares. But yeah, I mean, we've had this run up on the mining stocks over the last couple of weeks when Bitcoin price has actually been going the other direction. So we've seen this steady decline over the last few weeks. But the mining companies have done really well, and we've talked about a number of them. Most of them before like the last couple of days were really getting to green. Go back to March, was only really CleanSpark that was green. But if you looked middle of last week when we had a podcast, I think there was something like maybe 8, 9, or 10 of these companies are actually green year to date, which means there's been a bit of a turnaround.
Yeah.
So I didn't pay too much attention to these red days. These are small red days. If you're thinking about mining stocks that can maybe go up 100, 200, 300% in a year, don't get overly excited when it goes down by, say, 10 or 15% in a day. We've talked about volatility in mining stocks, far more volatile than Bitcoin. Look at Bitcoin as a volatility up to, say, 3 or 4%, but the mining stocks, there's even at 15% there with Argo, it's not a big daily change. We've seen changes on here where the price has gone up and down 50% in one day even for recognized ones. I can remember IREN jumping up well over 30% in one day. So it can occur.
I know you mentioned volume there and the importance of that as well, but as you're talking about some of those big jumps, a few episodes ago, you made some good comments about market caps, and you'll see those listed on the right-hand side here, you guys. Do you want to just give us a couple comments, Anthony, on the market cap situation? Because we're now starting to see the majority of these companies over that elusive $1 billion milestone, eh?
Yeah. I mean, 6 months ago, there was really, in fact, before October last year, we only had 2 companies that were over a billion, and that was Marathon and Riot Platforms. Then CleanSpark joined the club and then started to really excel. I think once they reached once they reached $1 billion, they reached $2 billion within about 11 days. So it was really, really quickly. They're at, not far under $4 billion now. They've been over $4 billion. for quite a bit of the last few weeks. But now, if you look at that list there, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There's 10 companies on there that are over $1 billion, which really says there's been some big movement. So we talked on the last podcast about now probably being 2 tiers in terms of the tiers that can grow and the tiers that are going to struggle unless they come up with an alternative plan. Even if they've got ATMs, even if they've got sort of like Bitcoin hodl, the challenge is to grow in the same proportion as some of these other companies have been growing over the last 18 months. And so it's going to be challenging. It might mean that some merger and acquisitions take place. So some of these smaller companies maybe join together and get the growth that way. That's probably one alternative to do it. But
now you mentioned ATM there, Anthony. Before we move on to the next portion, how do you feel about the ATM landscape now, specifically with these higher volumes? Obviously a benefit if you're selling into the market, eh?
It means it's easier. So, those companies from that mid-tier, and which we now call like basically in the top tier, they're able to sell shares at a much higher share price. So, if they've got a sort of like a 250 or a 500 million ATM, they're not having to dilute as many shares anymore because the share price is significant now. And you look at we talked about IREN. IREN were doing an ATM January and February when the share price was around about the $4 mark. Now, with the share price, well over $13, it's using like 3 to 4 less shares to dilute to get to that same level of funding. So that makes a hell of a difference. CleanSpark went through that process as well. Some of the early ATMs, you're literally selling the whole company to get to to get to a decent position. Now they raised 500 million by just selling 20% of the company, and that's a big difference. When you can grow that, it gives the shareholders the benefit as well. You don't want to be selling 100% just to grow hash rate by a certain amount. It's a challenge. And so the big Riot and Marathon have made great use of their ATMs because their share price, although it may look low at the moment, was never always low. I mean, it's been as high, both of them have been as high as in the $70 and $80 in 2021. It's with these bigger market caps, it means they can actually grow quicker, and that's going to be the challenge for some of those other miners that we talked about previously.
Gotcha. And I see, Anthony, a few people, HK, a regular on the channel, talking about some cash secured puts and basically option strategies to play into this sideways consolidation. So let us know your strategy in here, you guys. The one that I like to do, I'm traditionally buying long call options, but I like to pick them up on big negative volatility days like this, really to try and get those premiums as low as possible. But I know you can do cash secured puts or covered calls or whatever the case is to really try and optimize some of this consolidation. So let us know your strategies below, you guys. We're just about at 100 concurrent viewers right now. So we'll get into some of the questions here. Anthony, we're getting a lot on a variety of companies today, so this will be great. Before we get into the specifics though, I wanted to talk just quickly about hash price. I know we touched on this with DR on Thursday, so we don't need a ton here. And then we actually brought a few of Anthony's charts from 18 months ago, you guys, to kind of do a look back segment here and take a look at the indicators and the metrics that we were paying attention to at that point and see if they actually came to fruition here. So Anthony, maybe we'll kick off with hash rate quickly, and then we can get into some of those look back slides.
Yeah, so the hash price there, effectively, what the miner's earning at the moment in terms of petahash per day. And it looks like it's again, we had that little spike a few weeks ago again with the sort of like the boost in transaction fees and the runes playing a part, and that might happen again intermittently throughout the year. But at the moment, miners are getting sort of in the region of about $50 to $53 per petahash per day. So this was the expectation before the halving because they were achieving about 100, 110. So it's literally, we talked about, halving occurs, half the revenues. So for miners now, it's all about reducing costs. So getting the most efficient machines, getting the cheapest energy price in place, using the optimal settings for these machines. And we've heard from a number of CEOs recently in terms of they've been able to get better use out of the machines by underclocking the machines and therefore reducing the cost price there. We've just come back from Corsicana. Jason was able to achieve last year a cost of energy of about $22 a megawatt, or 2.2 cents a kilowatt hour. And that was probably, of all the miners that we cover, that was probably the lowest amount for 2023. And they use a number of strategies to do that. They can obviously sell the energy. They get demand response credits. They can curtail. That they're using for the energy outside of their PPA. They're able to use the energy when the price is really cheap. So in Texas, there is a market price for electricity, and some days it can be it could be 5 cents a kilowatt hour. On some days it can actually be negative. And you're literally then getting paid to use energy. And Riot now, with the new Corsicana site that isn't on a PPA and will be using market levels of electricity, they're going to use that strategy to actually keep the price down. Now they're looking at a target for 2024 of 3.5 cents a kilowatt hour. Still a low amount there. I mean, TeraWulf's about 3.5 cents. Cypher's a bit lower. Soluna's a bit lower than that. But that's their target, and they're saying, actually, we set the target because we don't know what we're going to achieve on all these things that we put in place, the strategies. And so therefore they might be able to get that price even lower than 3.5 by implementing some of the strategies they did in 2022. But it's no use saying we're going to get energy at 2.5 cents a kilowatt hour and don't get it. So they're putting in a realistic amount, saying, look, it should be this, but if we're able to implement some strategies, it could be lower. And so that's worth thinking about there, because it is about getting your costs down. $52, $53 a petahash, it doesn't give you much room for maneuver. No. So if Riot are paying $3 or $35 a petahash in terms of energy cost, it's leaving them probably about $20 then to cover overheads and all the other costs that are, the non-energy costs that are out there. So it's might as well be thinking about this constantly. Get them costs down.
Yeah, and I want to go on to a question that's kind of an extension of that, Anthony, talking about that cross we've discussed on the channel between the HPC margins and the Bitcoin mining margins. So I'll bring that question up. You can take a quick look at that as I'm reading through some of these option questions. But you guys, in terms of what I'm doing on the option strategy, long dated call options, so generally leaps, they're referred to, long expiration. So 12 months or greater. And right now I'm looking at the January 2025, January 2026 expirations. I haven't bought a lot of calls recently, but my portfolio currently has a lot of Bitfarm calls in there, around $1.50 strikes, TeraWulf in the $2 range, and then I've got some HUT in there before they did the 5-to-1 reverse split. So doing pretty good on the Bitfarms ones, but those are kind of the call option strategy right now. Now, Anthony, this is a question that came up on the HPC front. So, and it does make some sense, actually, if you do the calculation. So generally what Anthony and I have heard, and this came from Sam Tabar originally, but we've now verified this with a number of the other CEOs, HPC margins are very lucrative. We've heard anywhere from 60 to 80%, kind of depending on the CapEx and the depreciation on all the rest. Bitcoin mining margins fluctuate heavily based on the price of Bitcoin. So we've heard the crossing here, or the flip, is right around $100,000 to $110,000 US per coin, where it would then become more profitable or have better margins to mine Bitcoin as opposed to HPC. Now, Anthony, I don't even think I told you this, but I had a few of our subscribers actually text me saying, hey, I did the math as well. I came in the 111 to the 113 range. So very similar. And if you think about it, guys, if you look at the current cost per coin of, say, 30, 40 grand, you look at the price of Bitcoin, and then you relate it to those percentages we just talked about with HPC, you get in that $110,000 range. So my question to you, Anthony, is do you think this is going to really be a TSN turning point for the market? If and when the price of Bitcoin gets up to that point, are we going to see, I guess, the investor attention shift from HPC plays like we're seeing right now with Cores, Wolf, IREN, over to the pure plays? Or do you think that HPC thirst is still going to be there regardless of the price of Bitcoin?
No, it was obvious from last week. The HPC is still going to be there. A lot of those analysts weren't really interested in Bitcoin mining at all, and we'd have to see some real stability in the Bitcoin price. It is still volatile. It does change 3-4% a day. These HPC revenues are literally set in stone. So you have a contract there. And everything's agreed in the contract. Yes, there could be some penalty clauses, but there's penalty clauses in every contract there. But you'll be looking to keep those to a minimum. I do like the Core Scientific deal. I like the Bit Digital deal as well for different reasons. Bit Digital, they're basically leasing everything, so they're not buying any machines or any facilities. So they're leasing both of those, and they get a margin on everything. So they've got a reasonably good power rate. And bear in mind, you don't need the excess power in HPC that you have for Bitcoin mining. It's fractional in terms of how much that service uses compared to Bitcoin mining. So if you think about the $50 million of revenues a year, I think they're only using 3 to 4 megawatts of power to deliver that. You'd need significantly more megawatts to deliver 50 million of Bitcoin revenues a year. So I like that structure there. I'm still a little bit uncertain about the companies that have bought GPUs, and so and we hear this like 2 year to pay back on the GPUs, and they've got a 3-year life, and so everything's in year 3. So for me, there's probably a little bit of uncertainty there. But when you look at what Core Scientific did in terms of just asking for the capital up front to build these facilities, in effect as like a loan, which will be repaid over the first 2 years, 2 years and a part of the third year, and they still make significant margins in year 1 and 2. But from year 3 onwards, you're looking at 80% after all the costs have been taken out. I'll repeat that: all the costs taken out, not just energy. So their free cash flow from driving that business is around from receiving $290 million a year in revenues. That's the planned revenues from that $3.5 billion contract. Their free revenue is $233 million a year, and that is that's unbelievable. It's game changing. And if they announce the 300 and they get a similar customer, it could be CoreWeave. Really, it's sort of game over. I'm already seeing on social media, can IREN get a CoreWeave deal? These are the questions that are being asked now because people realize it's such a great deal. Even Jason, who won't go into HPC because he believes that the Bitcoin price will go past 110,000, and he's focused on driving that. And good luck to him. Bitcoin in the previous cycles, it could well exceed that, and with all the demand for Bitcoin, of course, we could exceed that. We just don't know. And when we spoke to the analysts, we had a lot of time on getting to these sites to chat with quite a few analysts there and back. So it was really good to pick their brains and find out how these real people, in terms of what they're doing, how they look at the situation. But believe you me, that room was packed at Core Scientific for the investor day there with all the analysts. And if you think about the questions that were asked, of the 50 questions, 47, 48 were about HPC. That's where the focus is at the moment. Not to say that Bitcoin mining won't change in the years to come, but we just need to see stability. There's too many things happening. We've talked about there's been a bit of sales lately. We know that there is some extreme, effectively gambling on the Bitcoin price going on there. The longs and the shorts, and every week we're always hearing, it's going to be the longs that take it on Friday or something like, or the shorts. So that doesn't help the Bitcoin price at all. So it does turn the serious investors off. There's, you look at these mining companies, most of the mining companies are owned by retail investors. Seriously, retail investors.
At least the pure play miners now, yeah.
They're owned by retail investors, and even the Core Scientific are probably starting to grow in terms of institutional, but there'll still be a little bit of a hangover because we're talking 5 months ago they came out of Chapter 11, so it's not like everything just changed overnight. They went into Chapter 11 for a reason. They've come out stronger, but they're probably just a case of now building back that reputation that they had before Chapter 11. and that takes a little bit of time. I really like what I see. I like what I see there, and we've spoken to Adam, numerous times. I've met Adam in London. I've met him now in his flagship facility at Denton. So yeah. I like him. I like the team a lot as well. All the team were there, and all the team for Riot were there as well. They brought out everybody for those investor days. So the questions that came out, everyone's there to address the questions. But I like that HPC deal that Core Scientific have got. I mean, Hive have got they're doing on demand, and IREN are doing on demand, and IREN have got a client poolside, and we don't know how long that contract's got. A few more months to go, but it's not like it's a permanent contract or a long contract. That will, CoreWeave is 12 years. That's 12-year contract. That's not even the norm. Norm's longer than that for some of these contracts, So
and I was surprised by that. Adam actually said 10 to 15 years is standard in the data center.
So when with IREN announcing it had like a 3-month or a 5-month contract with poolside, and people were like, oh, that's okay. It's a tiny contract. It's just in terms of length. Yeah. And what demand will do is, what they'll do is they'll be powering up their GPUs. And you'll be able to, if you want that GPU power, you'll be able to go on and you'll buy, that power at a certain level, and they might be able to sell their GPU power, maybe say 80% a day or something like that, So they're not utilizing everything unless they can get, some of the big players to go in and just literally take it off the hands on a daily basis. But the likelihood is, some of these companies on demand will be around about the 80%. I've spoken to companies in the UK who run these on-demand services for HPC, and that's about the norm. You will have days where it's slightly higher, slightly lower, but on average, it's about 80% demand. So therefore, you're not getting the full return that you would get if you had a contract delivering everything. So that's something to think about as well. Whether any of these companies try to go into arranging to find a customer of the size of CoreWeave, there was only a few companies out there could do that. And Core Scientific, they've got 1,200 megawatts of power available at a number of sites added together. They were in a position to do that, and they've got another 300 set aside to go to another potential customer. And we know from the CoreWeave deal, there were 50 offers of interest for that deal itself, which were narrowed down, but still narrowed down to a good number. And you might think now that with them saying 300 at that investor day, the likelihood is there'll probably be an announcement imminently that they've got another customer lined up. It could be CoreWeave, it could be another customer. And then you're into sort of like close to 600 million free cash flow a year, which would take serious exahash and serious price on the Bitcoin price to get anywhere close to achieving the same level. And
you guys think about 600 million free cash flow. You start throwing some traditional tech multipliers on there, 10, 15, 20, 25 times earnings. You're looking at some major market cap in excess of $10 billion now.
And they've still got a Bitcoin service that's got well over 20 exahash. They're good at what they do in Bitcoin mining, and they're not going to move away from that, because the question could be, if you're doing so well on HPC, why don't you just pivot across, and do everything HPC? And Adam's adamant, to coin a phrase, he was like saying, no, we're going to keep the Bitcoin mining business. That's what we came into. We know how to do that. They were the biggest producer of Bitcoin for the last 3 years, so they're not going to move away from that business there. They're like a, you look at some miners and it's like a heartbeat every month for their production. Sometimes it'll be up, sometimes it'll be down. You look at Core Scientific's monthly production, it's like a flat line, because they just constantly deliver what they're supposed to. There's never any sort of bad months for Core Scientific. They deliver every day. And actually, they're the first miner to tell you what they deliver on a daily basis. So that
I was going to say they deliver daily within the same 10% range, right?
Every day, I mean, obviously, when I say flat, it's where they should be. The Bitcoin hash rate could change, and therefore the amount of production could change. But it's exactly where they should be on a daily basis. You could probably plot Core Scientific's Bitcoin production for the rest of the year. And not be far away with the numbers, because there's nothing out there to surprise. And also, we talk about those miners that are constantly delivering every month, the likes of Bitfarms, likes of Hive, likes of IREN, month in, month out. They deliver exactly what they do there. But, you could argue Marathon Digital, Riot Platforms, over the last 18 months, if you were to try and guess what they were going to deliver every month, you'd have lost money, serious money, because no one,
a lot of
we've had some great December. We talked about that, that 1,853 Bitcoin Marathon Digital release in December. Unbelievable, broke every record, everything that was going. It was unbelievable. And I said in January when we were talking about it, I said, just hope it's like this is the start, because shareholders have been waiting for this. They've had a poor 12 months. They've got the hash rate where it needs to be. Start delivering this every month. And January 1,000 went down 800. It was
unfortunately, it was not the start. It was an anomaly. Anthony, I got to move us along here. We're getting a ton of questions from the audience, and there's some pretty good ones. Yeah. So, you guys, question from JG Lee. Was it unfair the first visit you guys made to a mining operation was Core? How can other miners be compared? The honest truth here is Riot invited us down to Corsicana first. Core Scientific happened to be doing the investor day at the same time. There was definitely some talk between the two. As we mentioned, a lot of the people flew out from Wall Street in New York, so they wanted to take the opportunity while all the investors were in Texas. And it's kind of just the way it worked out. We've also talked with DMG, HUD 8, IREN. We're looking to get around to all of these facilities. Anthony was actually invited to go to Iceland to go to the Bit Digital facility as well. So we'd like to go to as many as we can. In terms of fairness, I'm not sure if somebody had to be first, somebody had to be second. That's how it worked out.
We were actually invited to Childress on the first day we arrived in Dallas, which was a challenge really, because bear in mind, on the 2 days we went to visit sites, these sites are outside of Dallas. One was like literally about an hour and 20 minutes away. The other one was close to an hour away. Childress was 4 hours away from Dallas. So that would have meant 8 hours of traveling with a 90-minute tour of the facility. And believe you me, I would like to have gone to Childress that day. We had planned some meetings on that first day to meet a couple of people in the industry that we were sort of like, that we'd been in contact with. So we had those meetings. But, I would still like to have gone to Childress. We are looking to go to maybe British Columbia and see the sites up there, maybe have a look at the HPC side of things and cover it from that aspect. But yeah, with only 3 4 days in Dallas, it was, it was a challenge when literally two whole days were doing Denton for Core Scientific, and then the following day Corsicana for Riot Platforms, and I was flying back. We both flying back the next morning. So yeah, a lot to fit in.
Yeah, I don't know if I could do 8 hours in a car with you, Anthony. I would probably be at each other's throats, eh? You think in the heat? Mark, if we go out to BC, we'll make sure we stop through Canmore Banff area to see you as well, buddy. Anthony, next question, favorite mining site? Now, as we just alluded to, we've only been to 2, despite being in the industry a couple of years. I don't know, Anthony. For me, they were so different. Yeah, for me, they're so different, so impressive, each in their own right. One, obviously, 100% immersion at Corsicana. So that, Jason said in the investor presentation, almost like the Matrix, you guys, you've got hundreds of thousands of machines plugged into fluid in a huge data set. It just crazy scale.
Let's set the scene though. So Corsicana, obviously, we know it's a 1 gigawatt site, and they broke ground just over 18 months ago, October 2022. The sheer size, when we turned into the facility, come off the sort of like the side road, it was just mind-blowing. It really was. I mean, we're talking these massive 100 megawatt buildings. Now they actually, this really should be, it's 200 megawatt buildings. They're actually put 2 together, so although there'll be 10, it'll be five buildings, like literally of 200 megawatts in each big building there. But the sheer size was something there. What I liked about Denton was everything there is, obviously, it's a working site. Every building, the 3 big 50 megawatt buildings were all being utilized, and we got to go into their repair center. And again, I think the repair center had another 25 megawatts. But everything was there running, and it's like you're going into a proper working site, whereas really Corsicana at the moment still effectively a building site. Like to go back to Corsicana maybe in sort of 18 months time when they finished it, and get some great footage of hopefully they're delivering. And the expectation is they want to be upwards of 9% plus utilization at Corsicana. So they haven't had that at the Rockdale facility, but they're fully want to change that, and they've highlighted the reasons for it.
Yeah. Now, Anthony, as we're on the Riot slide here talking about the facility, the experience, I'm glad you called out in Denton the repair lab, because that for me and the Minder software was really interesting to see that aspect of the business. But as we have this slide up, you'll notice Jason Les was invited out to meet the former President Donald Trump, actually on the Monday. So we met him on the Wednesday, which was pretty surreal that he was shaking hands with presidents, and then us a day later. But it really sparked a discussion, and I know a lot of people in the space. Natalie Burnell has been talking about this for months and months. We're going to try and have her back on the channel. But the involvement of Bitcoin and crypto in the election now, Anthony. So I wanted to get your thoughts on that. We've got a slide on it as well here. Then we can get into some of these company-specific questions and this look back, which I think will be pretty interesting to the viewers. But you'll see on the right here, Anthony, Bitcoin becoming a big political issue in the election coming up here in November. We're starting to see both sides of the aisle, so Trump and Biden administration endorsing this. Really, I guess the angle is, what is the downside, right? If you piss off a bunch of crypto investors, you're going to lose those votes, whereas you could just say you're friendly and have them. But I'm curious to get your thoughts specifically on Bitcoin adoption and price, Anthony, if this becomes a mainstream election issue.
Yeah, I mean, the Republicans are already using the Bitcoin, to drive their vote. They've been very supportive for a few years now, whereas the Democrats, and effectively they've been, asking the SEC to sort of like, it's all a scam and literally 180 degree from where the Republicans are. It was interesting to hear Jason talk about, why he had a photograph with the president, and Jason is one of the CEOs that is really trying to drive Bitcoin and the fact, Bitcoin mining as an industry that supports energy infrastructure, rather than like, it's just a company that just utilizes energy, constantly at the behest of everyone. But he's actually, if the president is going to support Bitcoin, then he's going to be supportive. It doesn't mean to say that he's a supporter of that particular president, but that president's put his name forward and said, look, I believe in this going forward. And so, Jason's going to be right behind that. And if now the Democrats are starting to use it, it means that what Jason's done there has struck a nerve, with the Democrat side, and they'll come out now and try to, play catch up now. But the Republicans have been very, very much with this, and we've seen some of the Democratic senators coming out in favor of Bitcoin as well, going against their leadership and saying, look, we believe in it. Is it 50 million Americans have got crypto? So it's going to be some sort of, discussion, just like, health, defense, all the other, immigration, all the other factors that play a big part in these discussions, like we're having, you think you've got problems in America. In the UK, we've got our elections come up in less than 2 weeks now, and Bitcoin isn't probably even talked about. I mean, I've said before, some of the banks in the UK still won't let you transfer money to exchanges, because they're saying it's like, it's a sort of it's a scam. It shouldn't be allowed. So there's people having to move money from banks to get to a bank that will then sort of like let you purchase Bitcoin via an exchange and have your money transferred in.
Yeah.
But we think we're at the forefront in the UK with regards to like technology. We're there. The inventor of the World Wide Web lives in the same city as I'm from here, Southampton. So but it just seems that we're a bit behind the curve on crypto, and it's a shame really, because I would have expected us to be there. You look at all the countries, and there's hundreds of countries around the world who have joined in now and said, look, we're with this. I would have thought the UK would be a bit more stronger and firmer with that group.
I would too. I saw an interesting chart the other day talking about energy consumption per capita in different countries and their Bitcoin adoption and production per individual, and very closely correlated. We had one other question here, Anthony. While we were on our trip, did we have time for a beer? We found a couple in there. Anthony's not a big beer guy, but us Canadians, we always like to have a good time. So I got him on a few. Now, Anthony, next up, this is really interesting. So we went back into the archives here, you guys. Anthony's been doing this a long time. I think you're almost at 80 published articles in Compass Mining. So Anthony likes to use the term Johnny come lately. I coined Tony came early here. So Anthony was on the scene years ago. This is from 2022. So I'm going to let Anthony go through these reports, you guys, because we were analyzing these same companies years ago. Not so much myself. I was doing the interviews with the CEOs and whatnot, but Anthony was crunching through the numbers. And the third slide here, he actually ranked these companies based on the metrics we were seeing in 18 months ago, I guess, 2022. And very interesting results. So Anthony, I'll let you talk to these two slides. And the point here, you guys, is not to say I told you so or anything like that. The point is, if you look at the numbers, you spend enough time analyzing these companies, the numbers don't lie. And then you couple that with all the backstage access to the CEOs, the facilities, the community we've built here, the questions we're able to ask. You can get a really good idea of what these companies are doing. And the thing I love about this space, Anthony, is because it's so new and it's evolving so quick. As we saw in that bust, Wall Street analysts do not know how to value these companies. So for guys like us who are in this space day in and day out, I do think we have an advantage just because we have so much information available. The other thing that was interesting on the investor bust, these guys don't just cover Bitcoin mining stocks like we do. They would be tech. They would cover tech, say. So they're either sell side or buy side for their investment firm. They would cover all technology stocks ranging from NVIDIA to Tesla to Apple to Hut 8 and IREN. It's not like they spend every single waking moment like we do talking about Bitcoin miners and learning and reading and tweeting. So I wanted to bring that up, Anthony, because the numbers really do speak for themselves. And you definitely, I would say, we're onto something here 18 months ago.
Yeah, I mean, I started doing this, getting closer towards 4 years ago now. And, I started with 6 companies. But this actual article I did probably about 14 months ago was looking back at the financials for 2022. So when the Bitcoin price sort of dropped down to like just over $15,000 in December 2022, this was this is what we call the mid tier at the time. So we had the, effectively Riot and Core Scientific and Marathon were in the top tier, and then we had this group of 7 miners that were vying to sort of like join that group there. So basically, I did a what I call a mid-tier analysis article. It was very popular at the time, but I've been covering all these miners, probably for at least 18 months before this date here. So it wasn't like they were new to me, and it just goes to show going back then. And it'll become evident when we get to the final slide how I was looking at some of these and the numbers they were producing then, and I was like, very sort of supportive of some of these companies in terms of the fact that, the numbers, these are their numbers, they're not mine. I don't make the numbers up. These are from their SEC documents, so I don't make them up. This is what's actually, and you can check the numbers of it yourself. But in terms of like, if you look at the revenues there, and the interesting thing going back 18 months ago, I mean, bear in mind, where some of these companies are now. But if you look there at Hive Digital, in terms of their revenues, they were matching revenues with Bitfarms and CleanSpark, and actually getting sort of close to 3 times the revenues of Iris Energy, and sort of close to 10 times the revenues of TeraWulf at the time. So I think going back to there, TeraWulf and Cypher were sort of like new entrants to the market in 2022. So the numbers there are quite low. And bear in mind, TeraWulf at that point in time, if I remember rightly, had about 124 million of debt. So when it comes to scoring some of these miners on the last slide, you need to bear that into consideration. But this is just 2 of about 7 slides that's in the article. So if you go onto the Compass website, and you can go back, you can see this article in full. I've actually retweeted the article today on X, so go to my handle and look at what I've tweeted today. I tweeted one of the slides, but if you go to underneath the slide, you'll see a link to the article. You can read the article. That was my thought process then. This slide here talks about the hash rate. So remember the other day we mentioned about what the hash rate was just 18 months ago, and we're all these like the biggest hash rate on there, CleanSpark at 6.7. And now we've got, miners that are well over 20 exahash and going to 30, going to 35 exahash in the next 12 months. This is what they're aiming for in 2022. And yes, the future hash rate for 2023 for CleanSpark was, at this point in time, had been reduced to 16 from 20 and from 22 previously, and they got to 10 by the end of 2023. So this article was produced, I think it was produced in May of 2023, so we're already getting close to half the year. And then I did, like, looking at the current cost per petahash, so looking at the market capitalization divided by the hash rate there to see which ones were in terms of valuation. If you look at their IREN, or Iris Energy, it was known then, coming out at 32,000 per petahash there, and compare that to Cypher 82, TeraWulf at 103,000. And also looking at a lot of other metrics there, the amount of HODL. So HOT have still got like a sizable HODL now, but they had like the biggest HODL then. Look at CleanSpark's HODL then, just 9 million in terms of HODL, and look at 260 million. Look at Hive at 66 million, and now you've got CleanSpark with getting on for 664s, probably 400 million in their HODL today. So they weren't really hodling back in 2022. They were like IREN, they were probably selling a lot of the Bitcoin on a daily basis. If you go down to the Bitcoin per mine per exahash in that Q1 2023, look at the numbers there. So again, we talk about consistency. Bitfarms 97.7, Hive 97.3, CleanSpark 95, IREN 96.6. Again, we're still seeing those companies in the top 3-4 now that were then 18 months ago. Utilization, you've got Bitfarms at 97, CleanSpark 98, Hive 92, IREN 95. It's setting this story. It's not just one metric. These are all the metrics. I can't see what this is. It hash rate growth?
Sorry, I'll remove that one, Anthony. Just getting some really good comments about these slides, you guys. It's so interesting to go back. It's like looking at a journal or something from a year ago.
And at the end of the day, we can certainly do some if it doesn't go to plan. But what highlighted was here, because I've covered IREN now for more than 2.5 years, coming up to 3 years. When Dan approached me when they went public in 2021, he called me, and he was. He'd been approached by some of his shareholders to say, if you want to get more notice as a new company, there's this chap Anthony does analysis, and you want to get within that. And he came and we had a chat, and I said, look, I just need your data on a monthly basis on time, and I'll put you in. And I think at the time they were like half an exahash, 0.5 exahash. So people sometimes moan at Soluna 0.8 exahash. IREN were 0.5 at some point, and I had faith in them at 0.5. I've still got faith in them now at 10. 20 times that size. They've grown in 20. Who's going to be the miner? In that bottom group that in 3 or 4 years' time we talk about as being like they've gone through and they're part of the top tier. So again, if we go to the next slide, which is like,
I was going to say, if we fast forward here now, Anthony, before you get going, I just wanted to point out, you guys, take a look at the ranking on the bottom, because this is really the money line in the whole chart. Take a look at where Anthony had ranked these companies 18 months ago in terms of future performance and ones to watch. And it really does speak for itself, Anthony. I mean,
I'll let you get into the details. This is looking at about 11 or 12 metrics. This is looking at one metric. This is looking at profitability, asset ratios, growth ratios. So it's taking a look at all. And when I've said to you before, and people say, oh, you can't measure a company on production per exahash, which is one of my main metrics when I created 4 years ago, and I started doing this, and now all the miners use that metric. I've said absolutely, it's one metric. It's no use producing the most Bitcoin with your mining machines if you're paying the highest price for energy, because it doesn't stack up. You want to be making sure you've got the most efficient machines or the lowest price energy to warrant that. But in this ranking table here, looking at all those various metrics and actually giving them some weighting, which are the more important ones. Now, again, people could think that some of those might be more important than others, but I actually ranked the fact that margin and debt was an issue. Bear in mind, think about 2022. We saw, at this point in time, Core Scientific were already in Chapter 11. We saw the likes of Argo, Greenwich. We even saw Bitfarms nearly going to Chapter 11 because, You know, they had $160 million of debt. They've got zero debt now, so they worked on that over the last 20 months, got that cleared down there. So I gave more emphasis on those metrics there. I even gave emphasis on Bitcoin HODL because I know that shareholders like Bitcoin HODL.
Yeah.
And so, you know, by using all those various ratios, I came up with the ranking. And if you look at it, you know, effectively, IREN came out literally close to the top in most of those metrics. And if you think about where we are today, if you go back to the market capitalization of that period in time then, and look where we are now, IREN has 10x in market capitalization, CleanSpark's 10x in market capitalization, Bitfarms is over 3 times its market capitalization, and those were the top 3 in that group there. TeraWulf is, again, it's probably up, you know, close to 3 times its exahash. Hive, who was sort of mid-table there, you know, came out 5th. Their market capitalization is literally only 10% higher than it was during that period. And if you think about the revenues that they were earning in 2022 for Ethereum, it was astronomical. It was massive. They were earning more in Ethereum than some of the big miners were earning in Bitcoin. They just, at that point in time, it was great revenues for them. Same with Hut at the time as well. Hut were an Ethereum miner as well as a Bitcoin miner, and they went sort of all in on Ethereum. And then the fork happened, and those revenues stopped overnight. You know, 7 or 8 million in August, 150, 200,000 in September, trying to mine other coins. There was no correlation to what you could do with those machines. Now they're going into HPC. We'll start seeing the revenues pick up again from that particular space there. But very interesting to see those the three top stocks I selected back in May 2022, May 2023, based on May 22 figures, are pretty much the 3 companies in most people's portfolios. When we've done surveys of the top stocks, including Riot, including Marathon, including Core Scientific, I've done 3 big surveys over the last 3 years. In the last 2 years, IREN, Bitfarms, CleanSpark have been in everyone's top 3 overall.
So let's talk about the top 3 here, you guys. All in on Bitfarms from HK. So Anthony, you had Bitfarms ranked as number 2 back in the day here. I know you're still very bullish on Bitfarms now. So let's fast forward. Let's talk about Bitfarms, specifically this situation they're in with Riot, and whether or not you think it's better off to hold Riot, Bitfarms, both, or neither of these companies. So I'll give you guys just a quick little summary here. We talked with Jason quite a bit about this situation, and the word they kept using is entrenching. They feel like the board of Bitfarms is entrenching itself. They brought up a number of reasons, again, in their opinion, you guys, why they feel maybe they're not acting in the best interest of shareholders. So an example would be letting go of your CEO at a very pivotal time in the industry without having a backup plan. He's now subsequently come out with a lawsuit against them, so that's questionable as well. A number of different examples, I guess, of where they feel the board at Bitfarms is not necessarily maximizing shareholder value. Now, they came out with a bid on Bitfarms. I think the general consensus in the community, as well as us, Anthony, was that bid was a little low compared to where we've seen Bitfarms trade previously. So the stage has kind of been set. Now, what's your take on this situation? We've stumped you. I guess let me re-ask it. You're currently holding shares of Riot. I know you.
So from my position, I am holding both Bitfarms and Riot. They're number 3 and number 4 in my portfolio at the moment, and I'm still buying both. I bought some on Friday actually when the full market closed. Just buying a small amount, just as a drop there, dollar cost average. With Bitfarms, if they can get to their targets and they're not stopping at 21, they've already announced, site purchases again now, and they're looking to get to 35 next year. The only thing that sort of I have an issue with Bitfarms is the lack of CEO at the moment. That's the only thing that's really the problem. And they put Jeff as temporary CEO while they're waiting for the new one. Then they sacked him, and the timing of that wasn't great for Bitfarms. Riot, have had a couple of years or 18 months where they've been in the sort of the wilderness. They've been operating in, in second gear. They acknowledge that. They know that, not all through their fault. I mean, they had a weather storm in December 22, which wiped out 2 of their facilities. 200 megawatts of immersion cooling had to be, parts had to be resourced. It took a year for those parts to come through, so had no use of that facility for 12 months. And then they had a batch of miners that came and weren't operating at an optimal level, probably due to the heat in Texas where it gets to like 50 degrees. So those miners are being replaced as we speak with micro BT miners. And, they're online to get their hash rate. We should get a really good update in June now, because they've said by middle of the year, they want to be at just over 20 exahash. And they were at 14.4 in May. So we'll see that hash rate jump there. Bitfarms just sort of like just carrying on. They're ignoring the offer. I personally think that, being part of one big company could be great for both, actually, being the biggest mining company and whatever comes with that there. But I'm equally happy if they both go and do their separate strategies going forward. I mean, they just got to deliver those strategies. It's no use saying numbers on a piece of paper. You've got to deliver it. I'm confident that Riot will deliver their growth strategy by the end of the year, having been to the site. And I'm sure if I went to 11 sites of Bitfarms, I'd be able to come up with a little bit more than just I think, or I know, or I don't know. But going to Corsicana was sort of like a light bulb moment where you saw the number of employees on site, over 500 on site there. That's sort of 10 times more staff on site there than Marathon have got in employees for the whole company. So, and they'll ramp. And Jason said, if we're ever behind on schedule, we'll ramp up the numbers. Where it's one site, we've got to worry about one site. They're getting machines that are purposely built for immersion cooling. These machines will just be placed into a tank. There's no fans coming off or parts coming off that everybody else has to do when they get these, the Bitmain or the Canard machines. Micro BT have produced purpose-built machines for immersion cooling, and they've ordered 130,000 of these machines. So they'll be getting put in place over the next 18 months to grow to 40 exahash. And that's really, if you're getting a company that can just think of that, there's no warranty issue there, anything like that. If there's a problem with machines like that, they'll be able to, get them replaced. But they've done all the testing on these machines. So they've actually tested some of these machines that are built for immersion cooling in their Rockdale facility. So they've had time to choose that. And they've just gone literally all in on micro BT. They've even got an option to purchase another 260,000 machines to take them to well over 100 exahash. That's another 74 exahash on top of the 40 they'll have there. So well over 100 exahash.
And one point on that, you guys, that I didn't know, and Jason explained while we were there, is that purchase agreement is based on exahash. So one of the questions that came up was, well, if you already have all these option agreements on these rigs and newer machines come out, are you kind of handcuffed to these older models? Jason said, absolutely not. They're not handcuffed to the design. So they can either go with air-cooled or immersion purpose-built machines, as Anthony mentioned, and they can change the model based on whatever the most recent is and maximize. So contract in place, but only on the hash rate component.
And here's the thing. I know people are saying that I've seen some of the comments there. Bitfarms a bit off on its own, maybe so. But you know what? When you're the biggest mining company, and actually that new stock price will be reflected as the biggest mining company. When you come to grow, it's going to be so much easier as one company growing in size. The challenge is now is Bitfarms, are still, in terms of market capitalization, they're only a third of what Riot are. So when they go out to their ATM, they're having to sell more of their company to grow. Whereas Riot, we know Riot have already paid. They've got everything, all the money to grow out Corsicana. But what they're doing is they'll continually raise more capital because they're thinking past Corsicana. They're thinking of the next site already. And they're looking at sites now. They reckon they'll never get another gigawatt site, but they'll still maybe get out a site there, maybe a 200 or 300 megawatt site. They're already thinking about that. They're not stopping at 1 gigawatt Corsicana. You have to be thinking 2 years ahead, 3 years ahead. I listened to Kent, who's a commercial officer for IREN on DR's Spaces meeting on Friday, and that question. In fact, I asked that question actually. I said, we've had a lot of, obviously, when I'm talking about Corsicana, I get so many comments about IREN's got 1.4 gigawatts available. Yes, it's got a piece of land that's got, that has the potential once it's built. Do you know how long it takes for these sites to be built and get all the power ordered? And these parts that you need are 2 years. If you want to look at a site now and you've got access to power, you need about 2 years to get to where you need to be to turn the machines on.
And that's with all the approvals,
that's with
and
everything.
regulatory.
That's with approvals, everything like that. So and the question from somebody else that came up for Ken was, when are you going to break ground on that new site? And he said, I don't know, but hopefully we'll be ready to go in 2026. So he's thinking like 2 years ahead before you'll see anything come out of that site whatsoever. And actually, that might not be as quick as that. I mean, they've still got to fill out Childress. They've got other area capacity at other sites they can fill out there. Yeah. And but having the size of Riot, the size it is at the moment, it means that growth through raising money, through borrowing, through the size of their hodl, their hodl's at 9,000 Bitcoin. Bitfarms is at 850, I think it is, or something like that. So again, in terms of liquidity, Riot's got getting close to probably 1.3 billion, and Bitfarms is a fraction of that. So it's a bit like like in football terms, it's like a feeder club and a Premier League team.
Gotcha. Now we're going to do some rapid fire questions here, you guys. We've got a number of them in the chat. So Anthony, as always, not financial advice, but since you gave us our 3 top picks 18 months ago, do we dare ask what are your top 3 miners to watch right now? I know we kind of talked about this with DR a little bit. Pretty similar list, really, hey?
I think end of the day, if we're highlighting our top 3, it means these are our top 3 at the moment. What I will say, for transparency, on the Patreon, everyone sees my portfolio and my trades, so they get access to those, so they know when I'm buying or selling stocks. I did trim down some IREN stocks in recent weeks. IREN was getting close to 70% of my portfolio at one point. It's just getting too big because I've been, my articles have told IREN have been, doing everything great for the last few years. So I've been buying IREN for a long time, and we're buying the stock when at low prices, like just over $1, and so my gains were getting substantial. It's getting ridiculous. So I trimmed some down while we were away in Dallas. Actually, on each day I was saying to Bryce, I've just sold a few more thousand shares there and took some profits there. I actually bought again some more Bitfarms and Riot, because I think again they're ones that I've got my second biggest position is Core Scientific, and I firmly believe if they announce that 300 megawatts, that's going to see them. But there are other companies out there that I also have a holding in, not massive holding, but I've also got a holding. So in my we call it in my SIP in the UK, my pension account, I've got 4 stocks in there. I've got Bitfarms, IREN, Riot, and Soluna. So I like Soluna. I bought Soluna again when it was low. I read these presentations, guys. Have a look at the presentations. I'm not expecting you to go out there and look at accounts. And by the way, I have a degree in business studies, and I'm a chartered accountant. So it's like a master's in accountancy, effectively. But I'm a chartered management accountant. With post nominals and all that. So I've been qualified now for getting on for over 25 years.
I saw that question, Anthony. I was going to say, Anthony's been an accountant longer than some of the other YouTubers have been alive, you guys. So, and not only were you an accountant, Anthony, but you were an accountant for the Army, and you taught new account. You were actually a teacher. So it's Also, I think it's interesting. It's abstract accounting, right? Which is very relatable to Bitcoin mining. Anthony would go out and assess projects for the military and the cost structure and things like that, which in my mind is very similar to Bitcoin. That's unique. It's a new industry. It's different. There's not a lot of, I guess, benchmarks to compare. So Yeah, and Anthony knows his numbers for sure, you guys.
So yeah, so those in my sit there, but I've also got again, I've got positions in Bitdeer. So I like Bitdeer because Bitdeer look to be, in terms of vertical integration, seems to have got all the parts moving now. I mean, they're the first miners who announced they're going to build their own machines and use them for themselves, and also if the market determines they can sell machines to peer miners, they'll sell to peer miners and make a profit that way. But the emphasis is, if you think about the size they're growing to, they already look like they're going to 60 exahash, or certainly well over 40 exahash in 2025. They're going to be a big player. They've got some massive sites being built at the moment. So they've got one in Bhutan, 500 megawatts, one in Norway for 175 megawatts, and one in Ohio, where they just broke ground in April. That's 200 megawatts. So that's on top of what they've got at the moment. So and they've got effectively over 20 exahash of managed self-mining and hosted mining and client hash rate that they're managing at the moment. If you look at what they're doing on the actual miner they're building at the moment, their first generation miner came in at 18.1 joules a terahash. Now, bear in mind, MicroBT, what they're providing for Riot at the moment, that's a similar efficiency rate that Riot are getting now from MicroBT, which are one of the top 3 suppliers. They've also said that they're hoping to go through various iterations and generations of miners to get to 5 joules a terahash by the middle of next year. So that's 12 months away. Is that doable? We've heard about Bitmain now going down to 12, and I've heard in conversations, we'll see 10 by the end of the year. Bear in mind, Bitdeer, we've talked about this before, a few years ago, they were part of Bitmain. So, CEO of Bitdeer was the co-founder of Bitmain. And, Bitdeer have got 50 staff working on R&D projects, which is including this SEAL miner technology. And, like Bitmain, they'll get a supplier to build these machines, and they'll do that probably in Asia because it will be cheaper. They know with what they've done at the moment, that 80% of the cost of a mining machine that they're finding is the cost of the chips. They've got great relationships with TSMC, the big chip provider. And so, we'll get them on the podcast soon and get them to reiterate, because some of these numbers are coming up. Q3 is not far away. And, we're talking about 14 joules a terahash. I mean, it's going to be really interesting to see this. I've got a little bit then. Bit Digital, people know that we've spoke about Bit Digital. I've got a position in Bit Digital because the fact that they do everything in terms of a margin. So they're looking to achieve a margin on everything they do as a service, which is why they're an asset light. I think there's only like 15 employees in Bit Digital as a total. So they lease facilities, they own their own machines. They've got the Ethereum staking, which is quite a nice add-on there. They've got great treasury. The treasury is more than half the actual value of the company, which is just, I find unbelievable.
Now, Anthony, do you find any worries with so much exposure to Ethereum for Bit Digital?
No, because we're going to get the SEC will approve the Ethereum spot ETF, and therefore, that'll be another be another way. But actually, I think Sam came out today and said, even if if you buy Bit Digital, you're actually effectively buying the spot ETF then, because they've got such a big treasury of Ethereum.
Well, he coined himself as the Michael Saylor or MicroStrategy of Ethereum. That could be a really interesting angle for this company. You talk about multiple revenue streams. They've got the HPC, they've got the self-mining, they've got the flywheel or Ethereum staking model. And if you're able to get, we were just talking actually on the bus ride, Anthony, about the premium of MicroStrategy, you guys. So notwithstanding this recent purchase, say they have 14 or $15 billion worth of Bitcoin on their balance sheet. Anthony and I were asking all these analysts, why are they trading? They're trading at like $29 billion market cap, almost a 2x premium to the spot price of their Bitcoin. Nobody really seemed to have a great answer other than maybe kind of the Elon Musk halo effect of Michael Saylor. Maybe the fact that some people wanted to own individual equities rather than an ETF. But if Sam Tabar could pull off that type of marketing deployment to the investor. group.
I think what's interesting, I think what's interesting with Sammy's, and we talked about it a lot, so not covering it too much, is the fact that it looks like they're valued on as a Bitcoin miner, and the HPC is not getting a lot of reflection in their price. You know, unlike what we've seen with Core Scientific in recent weeks. So I think now Bit Digital, if you look at price action since the beginning of the year, their price is down maybe 40%, 38 or 40%. And Core Scientific is up 155% since when it came out of chapter 11. So, you know, a very despairing, you know, view. And Core Scientific's growth in the last month, even on those Friday prices that you put on the screen before, they're up about, I think, up over 150% in the last month, Core Scientific. So since that announcement with CoreWeave, their share price has gone sort of parabolic because the market's acknowledged that. Have some of these other miners, I mean, you know, Bit Digital have got $100 million a year with great margins, you know, 60-70% margins. So, you know, that could bring in free cash flow, say call it midpoint, 65 million of free cash flow a year for a company that's only valued at just over 300 million. And they've still got a Bitcoin mining service that's going to grow to 6 exahash because they'll use the money that they're achieving in the HPC side to actually grow their Bitcoin mining. So they're not stepping away from Bitcoin mining. It's been profitable for them. But yeah, you know, I've got a position in those as well. So, and I've also got a position in CleanSpark and in Marathon. You know, you can't write off, you know, the big players in this game. I mean, you know, people might think I don't do a lot of coverage on them too, but I've got my portfolio. I'm not out there to try and sell all the shares I like. I only give you the numbers. The numbers are what the companies put out. I don't make the numbers up myself. I just put them out there and do the comparison charts for you guys to look at.
Yeah, and just to wrap up the kind of portfolio discussion, I know we've had a couple podcasts about when are we selling. Kind of my position is I'm going to base it on Bitcoin price around $95,000 US. But I have been repositioning between the miners within my portfolio, as Anthony has been doing as well. So just for full transparency. Now, Anthony, we've got a question about Hut 8. We've really not heard much from this company at all over the last few weeks. Still haven't seen, at least I haven't, their May production numbers. We reached out to Sue Ennis. We actually were able to get her on the podcast next week. So we've got her on Wednesday, the 26th. We've also got Soluna on July 3rd, Hive on the 8th. And we're working on a few others. But in terms of Hut, we're going to have Sue on. So if you guys have some questions, feel free to drop them. Anthony, we have a question from Robin here saying, do you think they may have to amend their financials? What's going on? Why haven't we seen May results here?
Why would they amend the financials? Did something come out about that? I don't know.
That was just the question. Maybe that was part of the reason for the delay, or maybe they're having to restate some numbers. That was just.
No, there's a delay in their monthly mining update, which doesn't affect their quarterly or yearly financials. So they from when I looked on Friday, still hadn't released that, and you know, it does surprise me why they've not released it. You know, generally when miners are late releasing something, it's not usually great. And what they're trying to do is wait for some good news so they can release both news on the same day. So you might say that, you know, here's our monthly update, which wasn't great, but hey, we've just ordered, you know, 10,000 machines that are going to get delivered in 2 weeks' time to raise our hash rate. So I don't know. I mean, you know, we've had Asher on the podcast a couple of times now. We've had Sue on, came on her own last time. And you know, they're working through. They've done some great things in terms of the site they've built, and also that they got a great payoff from Marathon to cancel their managed service by 12 months. They literally got the whole payment for the 12 months, even though they weren't doing it. So they got like a $13 million windfall in April, which was really, really helpful. Asher's said, like, you know, judge me on Q3, because by Q3 he'll have had 6 months as a CEO to drive his strategy, and you know, so we'll give him to Q3. But you know, we would hope we would have seen some updates in terms of mining machines, especially these new ones that have come to market. So this new Bitmain machine, maybe they're waiting to buy, you know, the latest, most efficient machines. He did talk about he thought there was movements in the mining machine industry in terms of maybe price or efficiency, and that they certainly go in when they require it. But in terms of Hut 8 and the old Hut 8, we didn't see any mining machines purchased for last nearly 3 years. It's been a long way, and they haven't grown any hash rate. In fact, the hash rate's come down because again, they had issues with some of their machines, like other companies had issues with machines. Some of the batches of those earlier S19 machines or S17 machines weren't great. But we'll hear what Sue's got to say. She can explain. Hopefully, she can explain why the monthly update wasn't released. I certainly asked for it before we went to Dallas, because I managed to get my article finished before I went to Dallas. And I said, look, I can finish it on Sunday because I'm flying Monday morning. And she said, no, it's with lawyers. We can't get, and that's not uncommon. All these updates go through lawyers, because every time a company announces something, it has to be checked to make sure it's accurate, representative. So if a company goes out there and says we mined 80 Bitcoin, but they only mined 75, believe you me, it's checked. They do check these numbers. It's not like you can't get away with putting false information out there, or you'll have the SEC all over you. And then you'll have to come out and explain why you did it, and then there'll be fines and things like that. So sometimes companies take a bit longer to make sure the legals have gone through it. But legal teams from every company will go through their public updates every time. And we know that, having worked some of these companies now, that there are checks and balances before things go out. So Bitfarms have obviously got it down to a T, because they can get it out the first working day of every month by 7 o'clock in the morning, that first working day Eastern time. That will appear in my inbox, Bitfarms' update. And there's a couple of other miners that get it out on day 1, day 2 as well. So they're not the only ones that get it out really quickly, but they've done it for 3 years every time. It's like
clockwork, eh?
Clockwork. All
hey, now we're getting some questions about some of the smaller miners, Anthony, which is great. So we talked a little bit about Soluna. This one specifically was about Hive, but I wanted to just shift gears a little bit and talk about, number one, why do we even cover these smaller miners? And number two, where you see opportunities here with, I'm going to say Soluna, DMG, Hive potentially in that category, and SATO Technologies as well.
Yeah, I think I articulated, 15 minutes ago. I mean, Hive are one of the first 6 miners I covered, so they were a big player in 2021, 2022. In 2021, I don't think any company earned the revenues that Hive did. In 2022, they were close to the top as well. And if Ethereum mining would have carried on for those last 4 months of the year, they would have been top revenue earners in 2022 as well. So, that's why, you look at the market capitalization today, it's about the same as it was 18, 20 months ago. So they haven't.
I'll bring up that market cap slide, Anthony, just so we can take a look at that.
It's not much difference there. I think I did a calculation this morning, all the miners, and it was literally, where you're seeing some miners have gone up by X number of times, and Hive was at literally an increase of about 10%. So Hive on there, 285 million was their market cap. Go back to the slide, which had one of the previous year's slides. If you can put that one up.
Just one sec here, Anthony. The Hive one you wanted?
Just put one of my previous, put one of those previous slides, the one with the.
Oh, from 18 months ago.
Which one it is. I'll stop which one it is. Next one. Stop. No, next one.
There you go.
Oh, we've got market cap. We haven't got market cap in any of those ones. Sorry.
I think there was a market cap in here somewhere.
Go back. I did send you a market cap one, but you've not got it on one there. So their market capitalization would have been around probably about 260 million back at that period in time, and it's 285 today. So literally a 10% increase. But when you look at CleanSpark's market capitalization, which was at that time about 400 million, and their market capitalization today is about 4 billion. So 10x there. Same with IREN, 10x. Bitfarms well over 3x. Let's see if I can bring up the.
And where are you seeing opportunity now with these smaller ones, Anthony? So Hive, you've talked about in terms of a buyout candidate. I've heard you talk about Hive a number of times.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't have said any of them were buyout candidates until we listened to Jason and the reasoning for going after Bitfarms, and the fact that, you know, these sites, infrastructure sites with, you know, reasonably cheap power are going to be difficult to source going forward. So, you know, when I did an article for Hive on Hive about a month ago, and basically the title of the article was, you know, is Hive the most undervalued miner? And at the moment, you've probably got to say certainly, definitely one of them in terms of anything of Hive's level and above. Now, some of these, if I was to say which is the most undervalued miner, you know, you could argue Soluna probably is the most undervalued miner in terms of what it delivers for its market capitalization, and the market capitalization is it's tiny. It really is. I think it's just over $20 million. And people should be saying, well, you know, you're covering Marathon at $6 billion. Why are you even covering Soluna? You know, Soluna's got 0.8 exahash. It's got, you know, 1.7 exahash of hosted. So it's got a hosting business twice as big as its self-mining business. It's going into HPC. It's got 2 projects that are significant, that will bring in significant revenues. One of them's already been signed and agreed, and we'll start bringing those revenues in from Q4 this year. Project Catty, which is a project that's going to be based in Texas with 166 megawatts of power available there at a really low rate. That will probably come online in early 2025. But, you know, in terms of revenues for 2024, even at the Bitcoin price at the moment, they're going to be bringing in something like $30 million of revenues with a market capitalization of $20 million. That's like saying, are Marathon going to bring in $9 billion of revenue this year with their market capitalization? Oh, the heck. Lucky to get, you know, a tenth of that. So you know, some of these companies just don't get. I mean, we spoke, honestly, you'll back me up on this there. I mentioned, you know, some of the analysts were saying to me, because what was funny was we didn't know any of these analysts, but quite a few of them knew who I was and had watched the podcast and maybe read an odd article here and there and knew who I was. And they were saying, you know, what companies were I looking at? And I sort of said, I'll tell you what, have a look at Soluna. And they went, who's Soluna? What's that? And I had to explain what the company was. So it wasn't even on their radar. Now, this conversation is about going out there and buying. Please don't go, you know, Anthony's telling me to go and buy Soluna holdings. I've got a small amount in my pension. You know, it's going to get me a nice, you know, a round of drinks or something. You know, it's not a massive part in terms of percentage-wise. I think it's still only like 1% of my mining portfolio. But I like what they do. I like the fact that, you know, not many people know them, which is a good thing. So if I want to buy some more of that stock, I can go and buy it at a really good price now. And the new CEO, he's been there for 12 months. The changes he's made in that 12 months, you can see what's happening now, how he's grown. They were a 10 million a year, you know, revenue company. Now they're going to be 30 million this year. And actually next year and the year after, we're looking at sort of 60 plus million. And that's with a hash rate price of about $45 a petahash. We talked today about hash rate price, $50 to $53. So when he puts out his updates and the presentations, read the presentations. You know, he's been quite, you know, he's bashing it down a little bit. You know, he also says, you know, if the hash rate price is 65, which is probably closer to being more realistic, it's going to be these numbers here. But even if you look at the $45 version, still going to bring in good revenues, good EBITDA, so effectively profits, and they'll deliver free cash flow this year, which means that's like, you know, in terms of cash terms, how much cash they've got after they've paid all the bills, revenues cash, costs cash, what they've got left. That's free cash flow. Doesn't include depreciation. It doesn't include stock compensation. But every bill you have to pay physically includes all those. And they'll have free cash flow this year. Not all the miners will be able to say that, because what Soluna do differently from everyone else, they've got, you know, we talk about Hive having a cheap energy price. Soluna have got one of the cheapest as well, under 3 cents. So, you know, Riot targeting 3.5. Soluna already have under 3 cents for all their projects, because they have deals to, you know, they go and source this stranded energy where it can't be utilized for anything else, and they'll go and tap into that, and they'll build projects around that. And the other thing I like about them is the facilities that they build. They do look generally quite good. They, you know, if you look at facilities compared to some of the other mining facilities, I actually said to the CEO on a live podcast, Is that some sort of like, have you used AI to draw that? And he went, that's our real facility. When it looks like it's AI, he goes, no. He said, no, we got a, we have the camera. That's our facility, so it looks really smart. I do like the renders for their HPC facility. So again, look in the presentation, look what they're going to be doing in HPC, because this will give you an idea, what it could look like. But it looks really smart. And again, they're just doing things in a small way, paying the bills, taking a margin, and growing and getting these projects. I mean, 166 megawatts is no small margin.
Not at all, no.
That's not going to be no small money. That's going to be, game-changing money. So when they announce that Project Catty has had the funding, those numbers will go into the numbers into their presentation. They're not in there at the moment because it's not, no project's been agreed yet. They're not even going there saying we might get X, might get 50 or 100 million revenues a year, which could turn out to be this amount of profit. They're not including it because it hasn't been signed or anything like that. So they're doing everything properly. But, spend 5 minutes, go and look at the presentation, look at what they're doing there. We've got them in our monthly updates. And we do have, John comes on, quite regular. I think, if people listen to those podcasts with John, he's talking that consistent story through every podcast.
And we're actually we're in discussions to get him on, Anthony. We're trying to schedule next week, so we'll get him. Now, another one, we've got maybe 5-10 more minutes here, you guys. Another smaller one, Griffin Digital Mining, Anthony. So for people who aren't familiar with this company, can you just explain where the CEO, Rob Chang, came from and kind of why you think this company may have a little bit of a large mining mindset despite their current size?
Yeah, I mean, Rob was the former CFO at Riot Platforms, so I think was there for just over a year, so he's got experience of that there. He also worked in, in the industry with precious metals as well, in the markets, so he knows all about the gold ETFs and has a full understanding of that side of it. And you can sort of like that crossover into sort of like the Bitcoin and understanding that he's got that background there. They've only got 3 employees. They've got Sim, who's a CFO. And again, he was a CFO at Marathon Digital. So again, the people they've got, all 3 have got previous experience there. So they're really, it's an asset-light company, Griffin. They've been mining for a couple of years now. They went public this year. They bought one of these cannabis companies that was probably not going to be operating anymore. So they bought the company and then basically, use the opportunity to get listed on the NASDAQ by doing that there. So that's another way you can do that. If you're a non-public miner and want to go on the likes of the NASDAQ, you better have a big checkbook out there because it's expensive to do that. And Griffin, it took 2 years for them to list. But once you list on the NASDAQ, it gives you more exposure to, maybe institutional investment. If you go into certain index, if you get to a certain capitalization, you can be part of certain index funds. I think they're about to join one index fund at the end of this month. So that will give them more exposure there. At the moment, the 0.9 in terms of hash rate. So again, similar hash rate to Soluna. And Soluna own their sites. Griffin don't. So Griffin host their sites at one site there. I think it's like 26 megawatts of power. And so they've got a market capitalization. I think it's $50-60 million. So, probably at least twice, maybe 3 times in terms of market capitalization bigger than Soluna. But we've already explained what Soluna are doing there. In fairness, Rob Chang at Griffin they've got an ambitious target to get to by the end of the year. I think they set it at 10, although they said they'd be happy if they got to 6. I mean, I'd be happy if they effectively doubled the hash rate. That'd be a great achievement because we've talked about the smaller miners and how they can grow. Some of the other miners, haven't grown significant hash rate. Even Soluna's hash rate in terms of self-mining has been at that sort of 700, 800 petahash for quite a few months now, where we've seen other miners growing. This month we'll see some absolute enormous growth in miners. We'll see effectively Bitfarms and Riot probably grow by the size of a miner, a mid-tier miner this month, with what they've got to achieve to reach their targets. So if Riot achieve their target at the end of June where they plan to, that's like nearly six exahash. So Griffin, Griffin's talked about these deals, looking to merger and acquisitions, and and they're at a similar hash rate to another company that we look at as well, which is DMG Blockchain. So Sheldon Bennett, CEO there. Sheldon's probably one of the most experienced operators in the mining industry as a whole. He was the first one to do a study on immersion cooling, which he shared with everybody, the miners and all that, and they did some testing on immersion cooling, and they worked out that you could make significant savings in terms of power, and you could actually overclock machines in that liquid as well. So there was literally two ways of benefiting, and they worked out that you could be about 30% more better off using immersion cooling. Yes, there is a cost to install immersion cooling, and Riot have explained that cost, how much it's cost them to do the whole site in immersion cooling at Riot, but the benefits when they start fully using that immersion cooling will outweigh. So DMG again, about 0.9 exahash. Now they have got quite a few S21s due to be installed in this next month or two, and that'll take them close to 2 exahash. So they are one of the smaller miners that's made the effort to go out and do that. But bear in mind, I think a year ago they were at the same hash rate, 0.9 or even 1 exahash. So it's took them a while, but we'll start seeing now some of those S21 Pros coming in there, the most efficient mining machines on the market at the moment that are physically being used, and that will give.
Interestingly enough, with DMG, Anthony, I just brought a chart here showing they're up 93% in the last 12 months. So this is a company that trades on the TSX Venture here in Canada. They're not listed on the NASDAQ. And a lot of people, again, have no idea what DMG is all about. They're the one that's in BC here, next province over from Alberta. So if we do get out to British Columbia, DMG was one that Anthony and I wanted to tour as well.
Sheldon. We've had Sheldon on. I've known Sheldon probably over 3 years now. So Sheldon built the Mara Pool. So we hear about Mara Pool where they're putting their own. Sheldon did that for them. Also did the Terra Pool for himself, and I think Argo at one point were in the Terra Pool. So they created this like green pool for green miners. He was part of the team that was helped to build a Bitdeer facility at Rockdale. So he's got knowledge about building sites. He's putting sites together, building facilities. Understands the technology, so he's a back to the roots guy. Some of these CEOs that come in have got other backgrounds. Sheldon's been there from the start and grown through this and built a company through this. So he's done this everything himself there. With a good team around him. We've had Steve on the channel, who's the chief operating officer, and so again, they do everything. The production's good. They generally make a profit. So if they're not making a profit on mining, you generally find most of the companies aren't making a profit, because DMG, for the size they are, do tend to in their financials to make reasonable good profits, quarter after quarter.
Now SATO Technologies is another one. Speaking of Canadian listed companies here, so let's spend a couple minutes there, Anthony. They came out with a press release at the start of the month talking about fire at one of their facilities. Haven't heard a lot of activity or press releases from SATO since then, but continuing to be one of the most efficient miners out there, really playing into that thesis about smaller miners have a lot tighter control over the operation.
Yeah, in 2024, 2023, go back to 2023 for the whole year, they were I think they were fourth in my tables in terms of production by exahash. So from a production perspective, outperforming many of the big miners. In 2024, they're currently just behind Bitfarms. So they're actually, this will be the first year that, if they continue that, and to be honest, it's really close between them and Hive for second and third. I think they were joint level in April, and in May, SATO just slightly went ahead. And if they maintain that, that'll be the first time in in 4 years that Hive haven't finished in the top 2. They've been really consistent. So again, but let's be honest, this is a small mining company. Everything's on one site. We were told that the repair site at Denton had 25 megawatts, which was more than the size of SATO's whole hash rate. I think they've got a 20 megawatt facility. So the repair center, which has power there at Denton, has got more power than the whole of SATO. So it is a small miner. They're not traded on the Nasdaq and so again, they're on the TSX list there. I've had trouble trying to see if you can buy them in the UK. Not being able to on the 3 or 4 exchanges that I use, I can't buy them at the moment. I've set that to remain to try and find out. But another one of these that it's just worth have a look at the updates, have a look at the presentations they do. We've had Remain on the channel. In fact, Remain, we did our first live financial update about a month ago.
Really interesting, eh?
That was our first. To do a live financial update with a mining company. That's a sort of massive tick in the box. Wouldn't normally expect that, and I probably wouldn't expect many more of those in the future. So it was really fortunate that he came on the show there and was able to answer questions from the audience as well once he finished his update. So that was equally good. But again, these miners, these 4 or 5 small miners, go back 3 years ago, and half that top tier level there were small miners. Cypher had only had 3 million of revenue in that quarter in 2022, and that SATO are earning more than that on a monthly basis, sort of thing. So you've got to put in perspective that everyone starts small. It's who can make the right decisions to grow. Who's going to be out that list of small miners? And I look at sort of like from Bit Digital and Hive, and the reason I say those two there, really they are sort of mid-tier. But if you think about the gap between those and the gap above, it's like 500 or 600 million now, and those companies are at 300 million. So they'd have to be, more than twice the size they are, or 3 times the size they are now, just to get to the next group. So who's going to be the miner out of those sort of like 7 or 8 smaller miners that's going to come through and in the next year or so and make a run for it? And that's going to be the challenge. Bit Digital with the HPC, they could see more traction. Hive have got HPC as well, a significant amount. We need that number to go up there. I think they're aiming for 20 annualized revenues in HPC. That needs to go up further because we're looking at these other companies like Core Scientific, just 290 million. Yeah. And Hive have been in HPC longer than Core Scientific were thinking about it. So we need some traction, some of these miners to get there. So it'd be interesting to see who gets through. But Soluna, I think from the smallest miner in terms of market capitalization, look at the market capitalization there, 20.5 million. It's tiny. But what it does is it looks like it punches above that. Don't take my word for it. I'm just one person. Go and look at the accounts. Go look at the presentation. Get to understand what the company's doing there. Listen to John's podcast with us. I think he's got a lot of experience. John. He's worked in tech industry for over 20 years. He's a lot more knowledgeable, and he said he'd make changes. And that 12 months since he's been in post, you can see the sort of changes now, and you can see the share price growth. If we had the share price growth for the last 12 months for Soluna, that would be interesting.
Yeah, it sure would. Now, I just brought up our initial slide here to close out, Anthony. Interesting to see you guys. We're talking a lot about market cap on the right here, but interesting to see you've got companies in the exact same sector trading right at the bottom of their 52-week range, all the way right up to the top here with IREN. And then on the bottom end, you've got Riot, obviously, Griffin, and CLS or CleanSpark actually trading towards the bottom of that range right now as well. Hive and Riot. Now, Anthony, with that being said, bad end to last week. We're hoping that next week starts off a little bit better. We've got 3 interviews coming up, you guys. We've got Sue Ennis next week. We're working on John from Soluna as well. We've got Hive coming up. So stay tuned for those. Anthony, we'll be back with regular podcasts next week. I'll let you close out here with any final thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, we've spent a lot of time this last few weeks talking about probably, 3 miners. We talked about Riot, Core Scientific, Bitfarms. I appreciate, not everyone wants to listen to the smaller miners, but I'll reiterate, 3 years ago, I was talking about IREN. Nobody else was. This last month or so, everyone's talking about IREN. Now, all the Johnny-come-latelys have turned up and said, buy IREN. I was there, 3 years ago looking at IREN when they went public. And, they've been in my analysis. Go back and look through my analysis and look at all the way through. It hasn't changed on a number of these miners because they're fairly consistent all the way, when they issue the results. It's not rocket science. If you're producing Bitcoin, more Bitcoin with your machines, your revenues will show that, and the consistency's been there. And so, but who's the IREN of 2024? Going back to when they IPO'd, and it could be one of those small miners that we talked about. But we do spend a lot of time talking about the big ones. We talk about the CleanSparks and the Marathons as well. You can't not talk about those. They're two of the biggest miners with Marathon at 5.4 billion and CleanSpark close to 4 billion in terms of market capitalization. You're always going to listen to those, and equally, they need to reach their targets this year as well. They've got some big targets to get to, and we've had a podcast on who's going to deliver, who might not deliver. I'll put my money on Riot delivering their target, and if I look for a second miner, I'll say IREN, and for those 2 reasons, I'll put the fact that they've got one site to fill out.
Well, it'll be interesting, Anthony, to do an update on that video now that we're getting close to the mid-year mark, right? As a lot of these targets kind of had staggered goals throughout the year. So we'll stay tuned for that. But as always, we appreciate the analysis, Anthony. Great to get your thoughts on some of these other companies on the list here. As we mentioned, you guys, tough close to the week last week, but hopefully it's onward and upward from here. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and we'll see you guys Monday.